morning, everybody. Today's video is going to be quite different. I've been on a romance reading binge lately. I requested several titles from publishers that I've been reading and enjoying and not enjoying. But I thought instead of posting like 6 different wrap-ups for different romance books I've been reading, I want to do just one big single video talking about all these recent romance books that I've read. If you're interested in one book and not another, I will put timestamps down below in the description box so you can go see which books are what. Let's get on going. So the first book I have to talk about is The Accidental Beauty Queen by Teri Wilson. This book is about a main character named Charlotte who's a twin to a girl who does pageants. They both are in Florida one weekend for this pageant that her sister is competing in to carry on their dead mother's legacy of winning that title. Charlotte is there just because she wants to go to Harry Potter world. So they're very different, pretty much polar opposites on the beauty front. But then the night before the pageant starts, Charlotte's twin sister ends up having an allergic reaction to something. Her face swells up, she can't compete anymore, and so these two twins have to trade places because they don't want to let their mother's legacy die. And it's all about how she's having to go from nerdy, awkward fangirl who's an elementary school librarian and doesn't really think she's beautiful to being in the limelight and having to act like her sister and look like her sister. It's all about that journey of self-discovery, but there's also some romance in it with one of the judges. First of all, I think the lasting thing I'll remember about this book is it is so cute and funny. The writing style of this is so quick. The main character is so relatable. I think I read this in like 2 sittings because it was just that easy to devour. If you like reading or Harry Potter, you will relate to this main character. She is so hilarious and awkward and funny. One of my favorite things in this book is that she has a dog, and so she's constantly taking the dogs on walks, and she meets the love interest by taking her dog on a walk, so that's also a really big part of the storyline. So it was just so much fun. But I did have some problems with it, mainly because it was so fast. A lot of it felt rushed in the romance department. I would say I remember this book mainly for the storyline and not necessarily for the love interest, because I really wish there was more description of the love interest and them getting to know one another better, like romantically, because there's lots of good banter when they're just like first meeting each other, but then it feels kind of skimmed over when they actually develop something. So it was a bit insta-lovey, a bit convenient. I also had a problem with like the ethicality of a contestant dating a judge, which does have discussion in the book about it, so it's not like just thrown in there with no consequences. Yeah, that was one thing that nagged at me, even though it ended up being talked about in the end. I felt like sometimes this could go a little bit over the top and be like, haha, she loves reading, can't you all relate? So even though I loved the fandom-y parts of this and I loved how relatable she was, there were just a couple times where I feel like it bordered too far over into cheesy, which wasn't ideal, but it still was really, really fun to read. It didn't really hinder my experience as far as the pace of the book. And then lastly, I have 2 kind of just like problematic question mark critiques. So first of all, I think there's unintentionally some disordered eating in this book because it does take place at a pageant. It talks about the consumption of food a lot, so if you have any triggers about eating or disordered eating, I would avoid this, because there's a scene where she eats a candy bar and feels really guilty about it and regrets it, which it was just a candy bar, so like, who cares? And then there's also a scene where all the girls get together to have dinner after the pageant and they were just eating tiny, tiny morsels of food, which wasn't even really discussed as something that was bad. That, along with, I think the main character can sometimes border on being really critical about beauty. There was kind of this divide between being nerdy and bookish and fun versus wearing makeup and doing fashion. So I feel like it could have blurred those lines a little bit, and by the end we could have had the message like, hey, you can do what you want, but we didn't really get there. But those were my only complaints. The book is still so much fun to read. I highly recommend it if you're just looking for the quickest pick-me-up book ever. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was just so cute. The next book I read was The Unhoneymooners by Christina, which is their newest romance book that comes out in the middle of May. This book follows a couple named Olive and Ethan. They are enemies, but they have to be at the same wedding together for Olive's twin sister getting married. However, at that wedding, everyone except those 2 eat the seafood buffet and get violently ill, so suddenly there's this non-refundable honeymoon up for grabs. And since they're both the siblings to the people getting married, they are able to fake their identity that they are this married couple going on this honeymoon just so that they don't waste that opportunity. So it's about 2 enemies going to Hawaii together for a couple weeks and shenanigans ensue. This book was amazing. I immediately put this on my superior enemies to lovers shelf on Goodreads. It was just the perfect romance. It's definitely my new top 3 Christina Lauren books, so if you're wondering how this one compares to all the rest of their books, it is fabulous. As you can tell, I have a lot of sticky tabs. This is just the trademark hilarious Christina Lauren writing style, very candid characters. They're relatable in a way that never tries too hard, and they're just so blatantly human. I was giggling out loud reading this, and I rarely do that when I read, so it's just something that was so much fun to read. So I would say the first half of this book is really, really strong, but then it goes downhill. So although I loved the adventures of them in Hawaii, they're having their like angsty banter because they don't like each other, I feel like the reason why they were enemies isn't that juicy, and I'm a really big stickler on if you hate each other, and don't make it just like some flimsy reason that goes away on page 3. So I wish that there would have been like a more solid reason why they didn't like one another. Also, this is pretty light on the romance, so I wish that we would have gotten more like actual scenes of sex. And then the last half of this book veers more toward like a family-based book. Avoiding spoilers, they do go back home in the middle of this book from the honeymoon, and then they have to deal with a lot of the fallout from the family and deal with some things that were uncovered when both these characters were talking to one another after becoming friends. And I feel like the drama at the end of this book needed a lot more setup in the first half of the book, because it just became pretty melodramatic, and the main male character made some decisions and said some things that I think were really not out of character, but really made him like not a great person. And even though I loved him in the first half, the things he did in the second half were really, really questionable, and it's hard to talk about those without spoilers. But I think that that could have been solved once again just by some explanation in the first half of the book. So I think the emotional angst at the ending was just a little bit too much for me. I wish the book could have just ended sooner so we didn't have to drag all of that out. But even then, the first half of this book just made it so worth the last half. So I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. I think the romance development of it is so much fun, especially if you're a fan of enemies to lovers, and it definitely tops the list, or it's one of the list toppers as the best Christina Lauren out there. So this one was so much fun. You gotta pre-order it. The next book I read, 99% Mine by Sally Thorne. I have so many review notes on this, and I don't even really know where to start. I guess we'll start with the synopsis. So this book is about a woman named Darcy. She very much does not like staying in one place. She's a world traveler and photographer, so whenever her grandmother dies, she's really distraught that her grandma's last wish was for them to renovate her house, because that means she's gonna have to stay where that house is and kind of plant some roots there while they're renovating the house, as well as she has to hang out with her old childhood friend Tom, who's the person renovating the house. And so it's about how she's like stuck at this house with this guy that she used to have a crush on, but he's always been off limits because he was her brother's best friend, but now there's no barriers between them, so it's like this developing thing. Don't let that synopsis get you. It's a great idea for a book, but this book sucked. This book was so bad. It's almost like it's not even the same author that wrote The Hating Game, because The Hating Game is superior and this book was just a hit and a miss. If this book had a different editor, or if she rewrote this a different way, I think we could have something here, which is why I have sticky tabs, and like part of the book redeemed itself with the love interest, but the rest of this book was garbage. I feel really rude saying that because the publisher sent this to me and I'm doing this review for the publisher, but I just gotta be candid. Like, I really wished I would have enjoyed this book, and even then I still have parts that I did enjoy, like certain lines, but the way that this book is written is literally incomprehensible. She will introduce things and then never bring them back. She will be halfway into a scene and then give you a detail that the character is doing something when it was important to the rest of the scene. She just skips around a lot with no transitions. There's no clear timeline. The character's dialogue does not match up with what they're saying, so you have to go back and read their dialogue just to be like, what are you talking about? Because the train of thought just goes everywhere. I describe this book kind of like the writing style is the main character's flow of consciousness, their stream of consciousness, but then you don't get any actual description of what's happening. You're just getting her reactions to things and you're like, what's going on? I really didn't like Darcy as a main character. She was just childish and petty, and she was very annoying, very protective. Same thing goes with Tom. The characters just had no personality other than like 3 character traits. I really didn't feel like they grew over the course of the novel. It was just so hard to read because of the writing. I do think that Tom was a really good soft boy and there was so much potential there, but Darcy was just so weird, and so I didn't understand anything about her character or what she was trying to do. If it was trying to be a joke, it missed Auburn big time. I wish I could give this a higher rating because I actually really did like the romance at certain points, and I did like the male main character at certain points, but the trouble that I had reading this book, especially in comparison to how good The Hating Game was, I really just could not give it more than 1 star. It was miserable to read. So the next book I read was Passion on Park Avenue by Lauren Layne. This book follows a woman named Naomi who is a CEO in New York City who has this rags to riches story where she used to not be rich and famous, but then she started her own company and now she is. So it's all about her adjusting to this lifestyle, and she's moving into a new apartment that's the same building she grew up in where one of her enemies lives. He was rude to her as a kid, and so this is her chance at confronting him and his family for all the things that they went through when she was littler. So this book also comes out at the end of May, so this is an advanced copy of it. I'll just say right now, I think that this falls into the category of a pretty average romance for me. There's parts of it that are really, really great, and then there's parts of it that just were average blah. So there was nothing really bad about it. I just feel like by the end of this, I was left feeling like, okay. So first of all, I love that this book takes place from the perspective of this really powerful woman. She's a businesswoman. She's confident in herself and her business. So I like that it gives you that space to have such a successful female character driving the narrative. Although I really love the writing style, and I feel like this writing style is actually a lot better than like average, I would say. Something about the beginning of this book just really didn't grab me, so this took me a little bit longer to read than a romance usually would. Despite that, this actually really succeeded on the front of having a good reason why these characters were enemies, whereas I just said a lot of books don't actually give you that good grounding of why they hate each other. I feel like this book had a really valid reason, so it was interesting to see that unfold. So the enemies to lovers part of this was done really well in my opinion. But overall, I just think that this book had an excellent mix of a family book and a work book and a romance book. Usually whenever that happens, I'm just kind of skimming it for the romance, but I actually enjoyed seeing the other parts of Naomi's life. Specifically, her friend group was a lot of fun. It also really helped that the love interest was super funny and supportive and nice. I mean, once they got past their drama, but I liked all the characters in this book. They just weren't like outstanding to me. But then toward the end of the book, I kind of stopped really caring about her work life and therefore her friendships, so I just wanted it to focus on the romance, and I think that's because the romance scenes were really well written, but then the work kind of got glossed over, and it felt like there was a really solid storyline going on with her and her love interest, but then when they went to the workplace it was just kind of meandering, and I wish that we could have just gone back to her and her developing boyfriend. And then also this was just very G-rated. There wasn't really any climactic scene between the two characters, which is always what I look forward to, so that was a little bit disappointing. I mean, there was a scene, but it got skipped over, which like basically it didn't happen. I think it was a good book as far as like books. I really didn't have a massive complaint about it. It just was a little bit dry for me as far as romance scenes, and then the work life, which was a big part of the book, I just wanted to skim over. So I gave this a 3 stars just because I feel like it was in a very average plane. This is the first book in a new series, and if that interested you at all, then I would say check it out. Once again, it comes out on May 28th. The next book I read was actually an ebook, so I have to insert a lovely picture right over here. I read The Right Swipe by Alisha Ray. This book, the way I'm talking about it, I'm just letting you know it was 5 stars. This book is about an app developer named Rhiannon, and she has made this really feminist take on dating apps so that women have power and women have control, and that's very much stemming from her lifestyle where she is this hard feminist. She is so strong, she does not let anything bother her, but when she's at a work event, she ends up seeing this guy that she had a fling with, and then he ghosted her, and so he's this one crack in her resolve, and she is just determined to get to him. Even though he's from a competing app company, she's gonna use that leverage to try and buy the company. This book is fabulous. I love it. So these two characters, Rhiannon and I think his name is Samson, they are both people of color. I think Samson is described as Polynesian or a Pacific Islander, and then Rhiannon is, I think, Black. Also, most of the supporting characters in this book are people of color. There's people of differing sexualities as well. The representation in this book was so good, and it was discussed and it talks about, especially because Rhiannon is like this powerhouse in the technology world for being an app developer. She is very much revered as, you know, a woman of color who has succeeded, and so there's a lot of discussion about the scrutiny she faces in the press and with people's reactions to her, and how she has to manage being a loud, strong woman of color in front of people and kind of the public image that she puts off. So I think all of the discussion about being a woman of color, the women of color supporting women of color in this book was beautiful. And I think that this book, even beyond the characters, just talks about a lot of hard-hitting points that are these marginalizations that people experience that aren't really gone over every day. So this book talks about panic attacks. This book talks about single fathers. This is one of the books where every side character you care about because they have their own issues going on, they have their own personality, they support the main characters in their own way. But the main plot of the book, the romance, is just the shining star of this book. It's female driven and consensual, and it is another enemies to lovers book. I do think the enemies to lovers was done really well. Can you tell I have a type? I keep reading enemies to lovers. It was magnificent. I think these two characters really clicked and shined. The main character's feminism is so intersectional. The romance scenes between them were something else. It was so well written, so steamy. I really have no complaints about this book, other than there is the plot that the main character finds it really difficult to open up to people because of her past experiences, both in her dating life as a woman of color. And I feel like that was taken a bit to the extreme. There was just something about her being not in tune with her emotions, wanting to date and then being afraid of that. I feel like that was made into a much bigger hurdle than it needed to be in this story because there was also so much else going on. But that's like the only thing that I thought brought the book down, and even that didn't really even bring it down that much. So I still gave this book a full 5 stars. If you're looking for the amazing, intersectional, diverse, passionate, strong-willed woman main character, like, this book has got it all. You have to check it out. This one also comes out in June, I believe, or maybe in May. I will put on the screen when it comes out just for sure. Do not miss this book. It is amazing. Okay, we've reached the final book. So I just read and finished the other day Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This book follows the first son of the first female president of the United States, which is kind of like set in an alternate universe where that happened in 2016. This main character is in college. He's very talkative. He's America's sweetheart. At the beginning of the book, he has to go overseas to England to attend a royal wedding, and while he's there, he gets in this mishap with one of the princes of England, and the press describes it as bad blood forming between the two countries. And so in order to do damage control to make sure that the re-election of the US president goes well, they stage a fake friendship between these boys so that it will seem like they're buddy-buddy, when in reality they cannot stand each other. So they're having to have public appearances and visit one another, and then that kind of spurs them getting to know one another, being able to empathize with each other's struggles, and then a romance develops. So it's a new adult male-male romance. If you couldn't tell, I had a lot of parts of this book that I liked, and I gave it a full 5 stars. And it was so good, I'm gonna cry. I think the main reason why I fell in love with this book is because Alex is the best main character ever. I saw so much of myself in him. He is loud, he's funny. Like, I think one of the main things that sticks out for me, this book is just hilarious. I don't often laugh out loud reading books, but this literally had me crying laughing because there's a certain scene, I'll let y'all read it, but it's just, there's so many good parts in this. Also, the characters' dialogue is just so natural, but also very sarcastic and funny and ironic, and the way that they talk to each other feels so modern without ever being cheesy. I love the characters in this. It's another one of those books where just every single character stole my heart. So the way that they talked to each other and how their personalities came out on the page was really, really vivid. I thought it was just beautiful. Alex and Henry's relationship was so special to me because it takes topics that are really normal for teenagers and 20-year-olds, like coming out and discovering bisexuality and being closeted because fear of social repercussions. It takes those concepts but then elevates them because these two people are such figures of power and everyone is watching them. So the struggles that they faced are really pronounced. The way that that unfolds by the end of the book and how they have to deal with the consequences, which, I mean, I hate that I have to say the consequences because, like, you shouldn't have to face consequences for being gay. That was just so emotional for me, and I posted a vlog where I was crying for like an hour and a half reading the last 100 pages of this book just because it was so emotional for me to be able to see these two people and the support system behind them with their families. It's really difficult to talk about the end of the book without spoiling it, but there's just so many parts that made me weep. It was beautiful. The relationship, again, the funny banter between them was awesome. The way that their romance develops is just so wholesome in everything and supportive. These two characters individually are just so strong and dynamic, and together they were just a powerhouse. I loved them together. My only complaint about this book is that it does take place over like a year-long span, which, I mean, it's pretty thick, so I feel like it did that well. But I wish that there could have been better descriptions of whenever there's time skips, because sometimes a month would go by and then it's just like a gap in between what happened last and where we are now. So I wish that would have filled a little bit more of those gaps with like maybe a sentence or two of summary of how long it's been, what's happened since then, etc. But that's really my only big complaint about it, and it's not even that big of a complaint. It just like slightly confused me at times. But I will always remember this book just because of how relatable it is. The main character's from Texas. He's biracial because he's half white, half Mexican. So it talks a lot about those struggles of being from somewhere conservative, having to fit in and be at the top while he's being scrutinized by a racist and homophobic country. I just think this book was beautiful. It was so good. I cried so much. I'm basically pushing this book on everyone. You have to go pre-order it. It comes out May 14th. I already know this is gonna be 2019's Evelyn Hugo. Like, everyone needs to read this book. I cannot imagine anyone giving it less than 4 stars because it's just that good. I gave it a full 5 stars. I really think you should read it. I could keep going on about this book for 20 more minutes, but I'm not going to. Just read it. Just pre-order it. I'm begging you. Those are all the romance books that I was sent for review recently. I'm so happy that I enjoyed most of them. If you have any romance recommendations, or if there's any other books coming out that you'd like me to review, definitely leave a comment down below. Thank you all very much for watching this long-winded review, and I will see you again on the internet very soon. Adios.